I think it's really funny whenever I say stuff and I don't really think about it. You remember a few videos ago I was like, I've reviewed almost every Sonic game ever, and I realized that then I legitimately went back and actually after I said it I was like, I should probably clarify that, and then I looked and I'm like, wow, okay, there's a lot I haven't talked about yet, so I guess that's what we're doing!
So I set my course, my battle begins. There's no mistaking this feeling. I feel no remorse, no I can't resist. I'm breaking away.
There's no escape for me. There is only faster than light or sound. I wonder if Sonic can go faster than the speed of light. I guess they said he became a lightning bolt in the instructions for Sonic Adventure when he became Supersonic, so maybe it didn't really look that way. But maybe he can if he's Supersonic? And Sonic is sound... Never mind! Okay, so a few years back I reviewed the Sonic Advance games, and those were all pretty good games for the most part. And I discussed Sonic Battle in, brief, because I didn't really have that much to say about it. But there are a lot of other Sonic handheld games that I haven't discussed, so we're gonna start us off with the Nintendo DS. Now, the Nintendo DS is, well, if you're watching this channel and haven't heard of it, I'd be surprised. It's one of the most successful handhelds out there. It was effectively the successor to the Game Boy Advance, further cementing Nintendo's, place as handheld gods in gaming. And the DS is a great platform. It was and still is. There are so many great games for the Nintendo DS. Not just talking about the Pokemon games, or the Mario games, or the Zelda games, but there's a whole bunch of other titles that were available for the DS. It was a really great system, fairly powerful for the time, introduced the dual screen idea where one screen's a touch screen, changing how games could be made and designed. It was a neat concept, and it would be carried over into the Nintendo 3DS, the successor to the DS. And since I brought that up, I do want to preface this entire video with, I am acutely aware that there are plenty of Sonic games also on the 3DS, but for the sake of my sanity and video length, I wanted to just specifically refer to the Sonic games available on the DS itself, not the 3DS, because those are two different platforms. In addition, there are a few cuts I'm gonna make. Technically speaking, in terms of games where Sonic is in them, there are actually 9 Sonic games available for the DS, which is a pretty large amount of games. I was surprised by how many there were. However, a number of these I'm actually not going to go into detail during this video. The reason for this varies, but I'll start out with Sega Superstars Tennis. Now, I think it's abundantly clear why I'm not going to talk about this one. I forgot there was even a version of Superstars Tennis on the DS, but if I'm going to talk about this game, I'm going to want to lean into the other Sega Superstars games, in particular the racing games. So, talking about this one now seems a little silly, and it's not really a Sonic game in the sense of what you're looking for here. The original All-Stars Racing is also on the DS, and I'm not going to discuss that either for reasons I just explained, same reasons as tennis. Speaking of these multiplayer party games, I'm also not going to discuss the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games games, because again, if I'm going to discuss these, I'd rather talk about the series they're in, as those games there's quite a few of them up until now. I still remember when we first realized that's what they were doing with the crossover, that everyone hated it, but I guess the games are selling well enough that they keep going. I have played a few of them, and they are pretty good party games, don't get me wrong. I think it's just most of us would wish there'd be a proper crossover between Mario and Sonic, with taking advantage of their actual gameplay styles and typical platform mechanics, rather than just an Olympic-style party game. These games are fine, but not really what the community has been looking for all these years, ever since Sega started going third-party. I'm also not going to be discussing the Sonic Classic Collection because, well, it's a collection of old Genesis Sonic games available for the DS. Some people don't like this one, and I admit, some of the porting got a little funny. It's not a perfect version of these games, but it's not like Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis. It's not that level of terrible. So I think that this is a perfectly reasonable purchase if you can find it for a decent price, and it does let you take these games on the go with a solid control scheme. So they're fun enough, but these are, again, the old Genesis games, which I've already talked about in other videos. Why would I go into a collection in detail when I've already talked about the games that are in it? So that brings it down to 4 games out of 9 on the Nintendo DS. All stand as, well, 3 of them are original games for the platform. 1 is not, but it's so different from its other version that I'm gonna take the time to just talk about it now because technically I've already reviewed the other version of the game. To start us off, the ones that I think everyone really wants to hear my opinions on are the Sonic Rush games, starting with Sonic Rush. Sonic Rush was kind of the successor to Sonic Advance. It's a side-scroller, but it's designed for the DS platform, unlike Advance, which was designed for the Game Boy Advance, hence the name. Sonic Rush introduced us to the boost mechanic. This mechanic would be used in the 3D Sonic games past Rush, and effectively it allows for extremely fast gameplay. Sonic is able to go from 0 to 100 in a fraction of a second, and the levels are designed to take advantage of these long bursts of speed. There are platforming elements, and it takes advantage of the 2 screens by having Sonic actually jump up and down between the 2 of them. Editing this video is a bit of a nightmare, so I'm sorry if some of my footage has Sonic on the smaller screen. Anyway, the plot centers around an alternate dimension where Sonic meets a character named Blaze. Yes, that Blaze. Blaze is actually a princess from her dimension, and she's seeking out the Soul Emeralds. The Soul Emeralds are separate crystals from the Chaos Emeralds, basically her dimension's version of the Chaos Emeralds. Naturally, Dr. Eggman and his Ultimate Dimension counterpart, Eggman Nega, really, that's his name, I don't know why, are seemingly working together and trying to gather the emeralds in order to take over the world, because this is what they do. I don't know what you expected. They're not trying to solve world hunger, they're not trying to make world peace, they're trying to take over the world like Eggman always does. Eventually, Sonic and Blaze actually team up and attempt to stop them. The boss fights are pretty exciting, and offer some light 3D mechanics to mix things up. This is a 2.5D style game, and that takes advantage of the DS's hardware. And I think it's a good interpretation of what you can do with 2.5D style games. The game looks nice, it's fun to play, not super deep in terms of its mechanics, but it didn't have to be. It's just typical Sonic platforming mixed in with the boost mechanic. Being able to play as Blaze gives access to slightly different moves, but she can run just as fast as Sonic, and she's a pretty cool character all around. Overall, I really love Sonic Rush. It's actually a really great game, so if you haven't played it, I would highly recommend it. Though it does present the question, what the heck was Blaze doing in 06? Sonic Rush Adventure was the sequel to Sonic Rush, and it would take the gameplay in a bit of a weird direction, but I think it works pretty well. Rush Adventure centers around the adventure element where there's actually role-playing mechanics and exploration elements. Like you can gather supplies to build new vehicles, and there's like jet ski mini-games and stuff. That's already mixed in with the fact that there's the regular Rush gameplay you've come to, recognize in the games, which involves just the boost gameplay. It's like before, but it's mixed in with these weird, mini-game style exploration, world-traveling mechanics that it's odd to think about it this way, but it's actually a lot of fun. The plot is a bigger focus this time. There's a new character named Marine who's here to be Australian. Now seriously, she talks in an Australian accent for no reason. I actually think it's hilarious. She's a fun character. Sonic and Tails find her pretty irritating, but she is a lot of fun, so hey, you can't really complain. And again, the plot centers around Eggman and Eggman Nega doing evil stuff. It actually centers around initially a pirate who's trying to take over the islands you're in. The game seems to be set in Blaze's dimension this time, whereas before, Blaze was in Sonic's dimension. This time, Sonic's in Blaze's dimension. So, there you go. In any event, I really like this version of Rush. Rush Adventure is a pretty fun game. It's actually, I think, in many ways superior to the first Rush, both in level design, music, and overall staying power. It has more variety in terms of its gameplay, taking advantage of the touchscreen more, and it's actually a lot of fun. If I had to recommend one over the other, I would say Adventure's a little better, but both games are so good and not talked about very often that I think they're both worth trying out. The next Sonic game to be released after this is Sonic Chronicles. Well, we're not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to save that for last, because that's a whole other can of worms. I want to discuss something else before we get to that. The last Sonic game released for the DS, which, believe it or not, was Sonic Colors. Why am I talking about Sonic Colors again? Well, this is a completely different freaking game, basically. I mean, level design overall in terms of aesthetics are very similar to the Wii version, but it's done in the 2.5D style like Sonic Rush. In many ways, it's just Sonic Rush, but with the Wisps tacked on. That's pretty much the entire game. And if you like the sound of that, it's actually pretty fun. In a weird way, I actually prefer this over the Wii version, because many times the whiffs aren't even necessary in the main game. They're just like bonuses like I thought they should be. You don't rely on them nearly as often, so the game winds up being just effectively a Sonic Rush sequel, the third game in the series, despite it not being named Sonic Rush. There are side stories involving some of the other Sonic characters too, which is really cool, and overall it's a pretty nice version of Colors if you enjoyed the story of that game. I don't think it's necessarily great. I mean, obviously it's a weird port of the Wii version of Sonic Colors, which is meant to be the main version, and this is just an alternate DS, you know, completely skewing things around and changing the gameplay entirely because you can't directly port the game to the DS in the way that it was played on the Wii. But because of that, the game is distinctive. Hence why I decided to talk about it on its own, and I think it's actually worth a play, especially if you like Sonic Colors. In fact, let me put it this way. If you played Sonic Rush and you really liked the game, and you played Sonic Colors and you really liked the game, you are going to love Sonic Colors on the DS because it's taking both those games and just slamming them together. Alright, so the elephant in the room. Sonic Chronicles. What is the deal with Sonic Chronicles? Because there's a bit of a history behind this. The idea of a Sonic RPG was entertained among the fan base for years prior to this. On the forums, you know, people talked about it occasionally, and it was only because Mario had already done it. Mario had done, you know, an RPG for himself back on the Super Nintendo. And even since then, there were other Mario RPGs thrown out there, such as the Paper Mario games. But Sonic had never done this. Anytime Sega did an RPG, it was usually Phantasy Star or something like that. Sonic himself never did an RPG game, like a full-tilt, straight-up role-playing game based in the Sonic universe featuring the character. People thought Sonic was flexible enough to actually be in an RPG, and admittedly I totally agree. I think that Sonic is perfectly capable of being in an RPG, and Sega eventually decided to entertain the notion, and admittedly tried pretty hard to make it a reality in a really good way because they commissioned BioWare of all people to make the game. Yes, that BioWare. Mass Effect BioWare. Dragon Age BioWare. Like the BioWare that makes legitimately good games, RPGs. Like this is back when, before BioWare made bad games. Like before the stuff we don't want to talk about today. Like this was back before they were bought by EA and were pretty much on top of the world. Everything they made was golden. BioWare was a good studio, and they knew how to make an RPG, and Sega commissioned these people to make a Sonic RPG. So initially, we were extremely excited for this, because this is a company that has a really, really good pedigree when it comes to making role-playing games, and this is something we wanted to see. And even BioWare, in the interviews they did, was very excited about it, pointing out some stuff in the Sonic lore that had never been explored prior to now, stuff that Sega kind of just left hanging as a mysterious thing. BioWare wanted to explore it because in an RPG, generally they are more story-focused. This is the perfect opportunity to really, really develop Sonic's universe. And they did that, actually, to be honest. Some people are really hard on Chronicles, and I don't think that's entirely fair, because I think from a narrative perspective it's actually really interesting. Taking advantage of stuff we hadn't seen in the series develops it to any point. It focuses on the fallen Echidna civilization and what happened to them. I don't want to spoil too much because I do think the story is definitely worth it. And the fact that they decided to utilize that tells me not only that they read the Archie comics and knew that that was more of a thing in that medium, but also that they played Sonic Adventure, which is the only time it ever, you know, got to a point of actually exploring the fact that the ancient race of Echidnas was a major civilization and it died off. Now, Adventure does reveal why it died off, at least that particular civilization, which is because they made Chaos very, very, very angry, which was a mistake. But this game delves into other ideas. Like, it couldn't have just been one city or one civilization, right? There has to be more than that. So it goes into detail more. The visual style of the game is actually pretty good. The cutscenes aren't actually model cutscenes. They use a comic book style of delivery, which I actually think works pretty well for it. The gameplay is... well... at first I liked the gameplay. I did. Like, when I first played the game, I thought it was a really cool, you know, taking advantage of the touchscreen. And admittedly, if you're into that, yeah, this is great. All the moves you do are boosted by different touchscreen inputs, so it basically requires you to be using the stylus at all times. The problem I have with it is that it is so mandatory. You absolutely have to use the touchscreen without question. There's no way around this. The touchscreen minigames have to be done in order to do decent damage, otherwise you're just gonna get rolled. Each character has different abilities and stuff like any typical RPG, and overall the narrative is interesting enough to keep you going, but I don't think it really ramps up to any degree until the halfway point of the game. So the first half of the game can get really dull at times and drag in places. It's not paced very well. And even if you like the touchscreen mechanics, and some of you might, they aren't, bad, they do get very tiring. Like, so tiring. Like the game's an RPG, so it's long. And it's just such a grind fest where you're just constantly doing the touchscreen that implements every single frickin' battle. It's not a fresh enough idea or interesting to last multiple hours that this game's gonna take. It doesn't help that the game's not very hard. It's actually a very easy RPG. I believe this is intentional because Sonic is supposed to be a series that's accessible to children, and I get that. But also, I would have liked a higher difficulty setting to actually make me feel like I have to try, because as long as you're getting those touchscreen inputs, losing in this game is a rare thing. Now, I do think the game is constantly overlooked and underappreciated because I think BioWare did do a pretty decent job with it, and I would have loved to see the game continue on because the story does kind of end on a cliffhanger, apparently taking a note out of Capcom's book when it comes to not finishing stuff, but also the game was mixed in its reception. Like, some people really liked it, and I did. But also I admit that it's got a lot of flaws that just weren't ironed out. Maybe BioWare wasn't given enough time. I mean, Sega's notorious for that. And I think if that's the case, given the game's state, the fact that it seems like a finished product and is pretty fun overall, despite the hiccups, it's a pretty good game. So if you haven't played it, and you want a game that explores Sonic's lore further, tries to develop some things that maybe you haven't seen in the other games in the series, I would say give Chronicles a try, but don't expect a serious RPG. Don't expect something that's really gonna sweep you off your feet and wow you, because Sonic Chronicles absolutely will not do that under any circumstances. Whew. Okay, that's Sonic on the DS for you. Like I said, there were a few games I skipped over for a variety of reasons. Maybe I'll talk about those ones whenever I discuss the actual series they're in, but for now I hope you appreciate me talking about more Sonic stuff, and I can't wait to receive the frickin' avalanche of comments asking when I'll talk about the 3DS stuff and the PSP stuff, because, yes, I know Sonic Rivals exists. Oh my goodness. Stop asking me, okay? They're not very good. I don't like Sonic Rivals. But I will talk about them. They're not the worst things in the world. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.